Welcome back to the Cherokee campaign, where last time we defeated Spain effectively, we kicked them out of our territory and ended our war, so now we can focus on the 13 Colonies, the real opponent in this region. We got ambushed by them as we tried to advance into their territory, but we turned that ambush into a decisive win, slaughtering one of their armies and allowing us to take some of their lands. We also attacked them down south at the Carolinas, and that was a relatively easy victory. And then finally we saw a chaotic battle around Falmouth in Maine that we eventually won, allowing us to take that region as well. So now time to see what other damage we can do. They moved one of their armies in Virginia to the west. It looks like it's going to come and attack our core territories. Now that's a pretty good idea because there's nothing we can do to stop them. We have no defences available. Everything's being put into our offensive armies. There are a couple of options we can try though to dissuade them from attacking. One is to get a peace treaty. That option failed. A peace would be quite good right now because we do need to control public order in the places we've just taken, so it would benefit us, I think, to wait around a bit, but it's not going to happen. Option 2 was to try and give them something else to do. So what I'm doing here is sending a small army up north to be near to the enemy. Going to stand here next to that priest so they can definitely see me, and essentially hope that they decide to come back and either defend Virginia or go after my army rather than going to the west, because that would at least keep them in the right region. Up north we're going to attack Boston with the forces that won the battle at Maine last time. We can't send everything due to public order issues, but the army inside the settlement there is highly depleted, so we don't necessarily need everything. Now that army does fall back, and indeed it seems to be moving to the north. It's possible they were actually more distracted by my attack on Boston than by my little team coming up from the south. I decided to keep that team going because if their forces do all push up north to defend against us up there, then a small team coming from the south will be able to take Virginia at the very least. In their next turn, the besieged army at Boston sallies against us and even gets a small advantage on the balance bar there, despite so many of their units being at less than half strength. I think we actually have more power here than the game is giving us credit for, but we're going to call their bluff and fight them in this battle. We're going to be using the usual strategy of luring their army towards our exposed units like our cav, while we have most of our stuff actually just hiding off to the enemy's flank, although my musketmen here actually weren't hidden upon further inspection. They were meant to be, apparently they weren't. So there's the cav they're walking towards right now. The plan was slightly foiled by these musketmen as it turns out, because they started firing at the enemy as they were walking past. We're too close to them for me to completely outflank the enemy and attack them from the back. I was just playing the battle on triple speed most likely, so that's my fault for not paying attention. But anyway, now that the trap has been sprung, might as well just go for it. Going to send all the troops in to attack the enemy position. Since they're all out of formation, we can still do the work here. These mounted gunners just get enveloped by our charge. The AI tends to forget to skirmish with those guys, which makes them much weaker than they're meant to be. And as you can see, lots of enemy units here are all out of formation. They're facing the wrong direction, so we're going to get what we need here. Going to avoid being shot too much and get lots of little isolated melees that we can win and try and work our way through the enemy army unit by unit, trying to overwhelm individual enemy squads with loads of our own, since, as we've seen before, in a one-on-one engagement, our units can't necessarily beat theirs, even their low-level units. The cav who were luring the enemy can now make an attack, and there were a few isolated groups for them to just overwhelm towards the back of the enemy's formation, and then they can come around to start engaging the units that are just facing off against our infantry. So some very juicy rear charges there, destroying enemy troops and their morale, of course, although we are going to face the challenge of trying to avoid having our cavalry fighting in the same places where the infantry are in order to avoid that friendly fire, since if the enemy routs, our cav will suddenly charge in order to pursue them and kill all of our own infantry among the mix. So always annoying to deal with, especially in a big messy battle like this one. An enemy unit here had a pretty good idea. They formed up into a square, although they have so few troops it's just a tiny little square, but I think that probably slightly increased their survivability in that melee since we had lots of cav. Overall though, not much the enemy army can do. Stuff routing all over the place, and there go my cav charging into routers, probably killing loads of our own men. Always bad to see. Soon the rest of the enemy army routes as well. They just had a couple of extra units and we overwhelmed them. That means the battle is going to be a victory for us. We've probably lost only about 50 men to friendly fire, so it wasn't that bad. The enemy losing 4 times what we did at about 2,000 troops in total, and it does mean we have now captured the major settlement of Boston. Controlling the local population will as ever be a problem. We'll have to fix their observatory to make them happy as we tear down their society in general. One problem we have here as well is that there's a university, and that's creating clamour for reform. We'll have to burn that university down because it's teaching people that being ruled by the natives in an absolute monarchy is not the ideal form of society. So soon we will put an end to those lessons. Now, in the next turn, we can just start moving on. There was no response from the 13 colonies, so I'm going to leave some stuff behind for public order reasons and move as much stuff as we can forwards, because we want to keep pressing our advantage as much as we can, and there's not that much in front of us here in Philadelphia. One turn later again, we make the attack. The enemy have a sizable garrison here because this is the capital of the 13 colonies, so they spawn a load of units, but those units aren't going to be very good. Something's reinforcing here. We couldn't see what it was. I think it might be the army in the next region over is actually somehow reinforcing this battle. I can bring down some reinforcements to siege from a different direction, and this attack doesn't have those enemy reinforcements involved, so that looks better. But whatever the case, we're actually just going to leave them here because there's an artillery fort, so we want to siege them out if we can. Back in Virginia, the army we were stalking has returned to its position, so we can't sneakily take the place, but I have grown the army that I was stalking them with. So we're ready for a serious battle if it comes down to it. We will just leave the situation for now. I was trying to hide my army, but I'm pretty sure I failed. Now, I've also been replenishing the armies that fought recently, and this causes me to actually not have enough money to continue. I've replenished far beyond what our empire can provide for us right now. So that means we need to either tax some of these rebellious places, which we'll try to do, or lose some troops. And the chance to lose some troops comes right now, because the guys at Philadelphia do indeed sally out. It's a similar battle setup to what we saw earlier, only this time the enemy army isn't so depleted, and it does have a few decent units, including grenadiers and artillery, and having artillery in particular gives the enemy more options to play with. We're going to do the usual of trying to lure them into a trap here in the corner of the map, but because the enemy have those artillery pieces, they don't have to just walk at us as the battle starts. They can just turn that artillery and fire at the units I'm using to lure them in. So my cav are just getting pounded, and because I have them sitting pretty much on top of my hidden infantry, the infantry are getting hit by these shots as well. So that's less than ideal. I'm going to be moving the cav far away to try and draw the enemy's artillery away from the rest of my units. Meanwhile, I do have reinforcements in this fight. Only 2 units can fit onto the field, so they'll be over here just providing an annoyance as the battle gets started. Now, sometime later, most of my cav have come over behind the enemy's artillery fort so that their artillery can't fire at us. That's pretty nice. You can see they've turned the guns right around and have now just given up on life. With that done, the enemy's infantry started to follow my cav over there as well once they gave up on the artillery. That allowed my infantry to start moving forwards while still hidden to get into position to attack the disorganized enemy formation. Here we go then. This unit of cav, I think, was trying to move past my units rather than charging them, because we didn't get annihilated when they charged into us, so that was good. More infantry here moving up to basically form up in front of the enemy, which isn't ideal. My micro is pretty bad in this fight. I hadn't actually given them charge orders. My musketmen get rid of their artillery with a couple of volleys, so that went pretty well. Now we pay the price for not actually charging right out of the gate. My men take a volley at close range from the enemy gunners, and they almost rout because of it, but they just about get away with it and charge in to that melee. The enemy even turned around at the last second for some reason. Elsewhere, also getting the engagements we were looking for, with just the odd unit getting shot at. Now my cav can return from their hiding place to absolutely annihilate this tiny unit of auxiliaries, but once we're done with that, they'll be able to be more effective and start annihilating all of the other units nearby. Some of these melees are already going pretty well with enemies retreating, and now our reinforcement cav run across the whole battlefield for a big rear attack on the main blob of the enemy's army, and that's going to be devastating. Big morale shocks combined with the attacks coming from the front, that's going to finish off several units at once, and now the slaughter can begin. My bigger cavalry blob finds a few prey items out here and gets rid of them, and then charges in to join these main fights. I'm trying to pull the infantry out of the battle as the cav arrive to avoid hitting my own men, but it doesn't always work. You need quite a lot of micro, especially when the cav are already in amongst our troops like they are there, so indeed friendly fire will be on the cards. A couple more enemy units from elsewhere on the battlefield formed up and actually got into a line, but by that point we had all of our army together, so their formation would save them. Here was a bit of bad luck. I charged into this unit with loads of cav. We didn't really lose anything, but we did lose our commander, another high-ranking commander, also named Enoli, which happened earlier in the series, I seem to remember. So, very unlucky name it seems. But anyway, this battle will be won. Those remaining units go, and there we have it. The enemy losing many times more what we did. Plenty of losses to friendly fire on our side, or friendly hooves as it were. And that's going to be Philadelphia effectively captured. They're about to run out of supplies, so even though we didn't kill all of them, the rest will go away in a second. Now their army at Virginia went on the offensive, and right after that they offer me a peace treaty, so it seems they're trying to threaten me with this move. I eventually turned that treaty down because I think we're actually in a very good position. So there we go, Philadelphia has surrendered to us now. Controlling public order will be a huge problem. We get the -30 resistance to invaders, and you can only get up to +20 from garrison, so even if we fill the place with troops, we've still got quite a way to go in terms of getting the people happy. Still though, we are in a good situation militarily, as I said, because even though this army threatens us as it moves west, we can just attack everything they've left behind. There are only 2 13 colonies settlements left. I guess they're the 2 colonies, rapidly going down to 1 there as we get a surrender in Virginia. That's good to see. As for the last settlement, I just put something together using the armies to the north and south now to try and get as much stuff as we can to throw into that attack. There is a somewhat substantial enemy force there, but because all of our numbers are quite concentrated, we can get an army like this which is able to auto-resolve this engagement. Big advantage for us. They won't surrender, so we'll just have them killed just like that. Decent losses for us, but it doesn't matter in this scenario because the enemy are now gone. That's going to be the end of that war. Easy peasy. The 13 colonies have been kicked out of our lands, which was one of our major objectives, and it actually proved to be quite a lot easier than I thought it would, considering that they had a decent advantage over us at the start of the war. We do still have to deal, though, with the British. In order to win the campaign, as we can see here, we have to own Florida, which we gave to Britain earlier in the campaign. So that means we need to prepare to fight them, and it seems they're preparing as well. They put their army up on the border with us. I think they're up to something, and indeed, a couple of turns later, after we just sat around trying to get public order under control and building things up, they actually suddenly declare war on us. So now we're in a bit of trouble. We aren't prepared for this at all at the moment, and there's the additional danger that when you're at war with Britain, we're not just at war with that one region, we're now once again going to be under the threat of naval invasion at any time. Seems they're already naval invading someone there in Europe, and for whatever reason their forces don't move out, so we don't lose Georgia immediately as I thought we would. There's an American rebellion near Philadelphia, but we can easily crush it using the stack we have nearby, so that's no problem. And it was quite nice of them to rebel actually, because by killing them we get the crackdown public order bonus that allows us to now neutralize things there. So that's very nice, but we still need to put something together here. We need to take units away from public order duty to fight the British. They could easily take 2 of our regions if they wanted to. Maybe they don't want to, but whatever the case, we need to take Florida. Now, as a brief aside, I started getting trade deals with loads of random European powers. Not that we can actually trade with them, just to improve our relationships, to reduce the chance of us getting invaded. But they kept asking in return for these deals for us to give them technology, so it revealed to us that we, despite being a Native American faction, actually have various technologies that European powers haven't managed to master yet. So we've advanced beyond them, mostly with techs that we can't actually use ourselves, and now we're using this knowledge to make the Europeans do what we want, which is a very curious state of affairs, I think. The British very sportingly don't go after my territory, instead they seem to be moving to the west. Perhaps they want to go for territories like Lower Louisiana, but still, they're not making any concerted push. Here we are in the next turn again, they're still moving around, but not necessarily going for anything in particular. They seem to be walking in a big U shape. Really wasn't sure what they were doing, and by that time I'd got a load of units together from our stuff up north to go and put a full stack besieging Florida. So this has gone much better than I expected it to go. A couple of turns ago I thought we were in trouble. It appears that actually we are not. One more turn passes, the British still just moving around. I think they really weren't ready for this. They probably felt obligated to do something about the destruction of the 13 colonies, but didn't actually want to do anything. So we just wait a couple of turns, they continue wandering around aimlessly, and they run out of supplies in Florida. So now we're going to get our final battle. Their stack of mostly line infantry, some of them being auxiliary troops, comes to attack our usual army of warriors and cav. I've got cav hidden on the right, our warriors and gunners in the middle, and more cav on the left. These cav are actually going to spring into action because the enemy, for some reason, deployed one unit on its own in front of our army. So I thought, well, we'll just send the cav forward to get rid of these guys. The rest of their stuff's in the fort over there or on the other side of it. So this unit's in trouble, going to get completely annihilated by this charge by an overwhelming cavalry blob. The only downside to doing this is that it does attract the attention of the enemy's mortars. They've got 2 units of mortars who are right at the centre of the enemy's fort, and they can now hit us, although they're also hitting the line infantry we're attacking, and I think that demoralised them and allowed them to rout a bit faster than they otherwise would have. So maybe that mortar attack actually saved some lives on our side in the end. Now I brought the cav back towards our lines, but they were pursued by the enemy's cav, these mounted gunners. I eventually got bored of being shot at and just turned around because the enemy got quite close, and we did manage to get them into melee there, so that's nice. However, there are more pursuers on the way, a couple of units of line infantry and more gunners. So that meant I needed to move up my main line now and get this battle started in order to support the cavalry as best I can. As the line infantry moves to outflank my cavalry blob, my musket troops start firing on them, and they actually do quite a lot of damage here. Since the whole unit fires at once with these musketmen, they're pretty good as gun units, probably better than early line infantry, as I think I mentioned earlier, but we're still not going to use them for line battling because we're mostly a melee army. We're just charging in for it. That first unit routs already thanks to the gunfire. The cav's going to move away to avoid fighting this infantry square, and the square's going to go down anyway because our infantry will just overcome it. There's another unit over here which will also be charged and again overwhelmed by our numbers because it's really just out on its own. That unit we just charged has already routed, so things going very well, and we followed through on that momentum and just kept going because the enemy were effectively in a column behind the units we just killed, slowly coming out of the fort towards us, so we could just keep charging forward and attacking units one at a time, all very good. And each time the enemy will just be disappearing underneath our troops, and somewhere in there is an enemy unit getting killed very quickly, and they're easy to rout since they're just being attacked from all sides effectively. I cav just ploughing through there to avoid fighting near the infantry to try and minimise friendly fire. Not that I think I really did that in this battle since we are coming to the end of things. Here's another unit getting hit by cav just to stop them from firing for a moment so our infantry can charge up and support that attack. The enemy's mortar crews actually came out of the fort to fight with my cav there, but they didn't do very well, as you might imagine. And they've still got more units that they've yet to deploy. They're slowly coming out of the fort. The door's too small, so they can't deploy their forces quickly. That means we've easily overcome the guys outside. And as the guys inside come out, they find they're just overwhelmed because all of our army is just standing here. They turn around and start running, but they're not going to be able to escape in this case. Even though their routing companions were blocking us a little bit, we did get these guys into melee. There is somewhat of an advantage for the enemy to fighting here in particular, because in amongst the fortifications it's quite hard to outflank the enemy. We can still overwhelm them with numbers and momentum, and we can come around behind them with our cav. There's one flanking opportunity, so we might as well take it. These cav hack their way through the routers to get to those auxiliaries who will be nice and weak. We shall punish those traitors for siding with the British, and that's also going to count as a rear attack on the infantry, the line infantry, and they start routing as well. So things going extremely well. Everything will be slaughtered. We've just taken the enemy apart piecemeal. They've got a few units left, but they're all trapped inside the fort, and they really do seem to be trapped because they actually can't open the door. They're firing at us when the door's closed, presumably because I'm standing just outside it. The game doesn't let the door open. And they are shooting their own men, these mounted guns. You can see line infantry falling all over the place. I think they killed somewhere between 50 and 100 of their own troops before they finally worked out how to get the door open. But once they're out here, they're going to find it's just an enormous glitchy blob that they have to face now. So this fight then lasted a long time because it's just a tiny amount of our forces fighting with a tiny amount of theirs, gradually grinding each other down. I tried to get away from the door, but the blob was too real. We couldn't find away from it, so this fight just had to last. Eventually, though, the enemy did manage to somehow overcome the odds and pushing our men back and gaining some ground on us. Not really sure how they did this. Must have somehow triggered a charge from within the melee. But then this doesn't really help them because now they're just more surrounded. They're going to die faster. They can't possibly hope to hack through all of us. I think they just wanted to fight to the death here because if they wanted to escape, they could have just gone out any one of the other doors of the fort. They wanted to just get into the meat of things and see what happens. And what happens is they all got killed right away. The survivors are going to rout, but they need to rout through this enormous crowd, so obviously they're not going to be escaping, and we don't want to let them escape. That brings the battle to an end, a very inglorious end for the British. They were absolutely annihilated there, losing thousands of troops. We lost a couple of hundred, and of course they have now lost Florida to us. That means, if you were paying close attention, that we have won the campaign. Or have we, as this message reveals? I thought that would be the end, but it actually says you have to hold your territory until the time limit runs out, which I didn't think you had to do. That's 1750 is talking about, presumably. It's currently 1727, which means we have to wait loads of turns to actually make the campaign be officially won. But, you know, that text box did say campaign 1 on it, so I'm willing to take that. An interesting point is that we actually went over the time limit of vanilla. In Darthmod, or the version I'm playing, it's 4 turns per year, so if I had done that normally, I would have lost the campaign. This actually happened right after the French brought an army over, landed it at the opposite end of the continent to where all of our forces are, and then declared war on me. So it looks like I'm actually probably not going to keep all of those holdings until the time limit runs out. Although that said, this is only a small army. I could just walk up and eventually defeat it. It might take a few territories, but I think we would win in the end. I just can't be bothered at this point. We know it's possible. Looks like Spain are currently preparing something right there as well. Maybe now that we have Florida again, they're going to resume their stuff from earlier in the campaign where they kept invading it. So that's kind of annoying. What I wanted to do here was go out by just sending an army to Europe to see what would happen. But I think we can barely afford to defend our own territory against all this stuff, and would probably just get annihilated if we actually put a full stack's worth of troops off somewhere else trying to fight in Europe, and we'd probably need more than a full stack as well. So I might try and do that on my own to see if I can get something going for a special bonus episode, but it may not actually be possible. Haven't tried it yet. We shall see. And I will call this campaign done now for all intents and purposes. We saw the campaign 1 text, so even though we haven't technically won the campaign according to the game's rules, I'll take that because it's going to take absolutely forever to officially win the campaign. So, thank you for watching this Cherokee experience. We have sort of successfully retaken North America, and while the Europeans will probably just be back again and again with increasingly better technology, we won't hold it forever. We can at least for now revel in the native supremacy once again over the continent, and a unified native supremacy. Before it was all the different tribes, now it's mostly just one tribe, so this is truly a time of unity for the indigenous peoples of the North American continent. Although that said, most of the people we're ruling are actually the European colonists at this point. We'll make them tribal soon enough. So as for my next Abridged series, while I have Empire installed, I wanted to try a potentially very short campaign where I do a challenge run as one of the Indian factions and do elephant and cav spam, a no infantry challenge run, just to see what would happen, essentially. Someone suggested it in a comment ages ago, I think, and I thought that was a fun idea, so I want to try that out. And as for other ideas, not really sure, so do leave your suggestions as always in the comments. I'll also be taking a look at the endings of previous Abridged campaigns where people left suggestions to work out what might be happening next. So until then, or until potentially the extra episode of this series, if there turns out to be one, I hope you have a very good day, and thank you for joining me for the Abridged Cherokee campaign.